Commander Elena Reyes steadied herself against the emergency bulkhead as orbital platform Delta shuddered beneath her boots. The explosion had taken out two of the station's four stabilizers, and now the entire structure was slowly rotating off its designated axis. Status report. She barked into her neural implant, maintaining perfect balance despite the tilting floor. Life support at 63% and dropping, Commander, came the calm voice of Lieutenant Santos. Evacuation pods 7 through 12 are deployed. 8 minutes until structural integrity fails in the eastern quadrant. Elena moved with practiced efficiency through the smoke-filled corridor, helping a limping technician into an evacuation pod. 5 years of leading Earth's orbital defense initiative had prepared her for crises like this, though usually they ran these scenarios as drills rather than actual emergencies. "How many still aboard?" she asked, sealing the pod and sending it hurtling toward the emergency collection point in low orbit. 17 personnel unaccounted for, mostly from engineering and xenobiology. Of course it would be the scientists, always the last to abandon their precious data. Elena adjusted her course, heading for the xenobiology lab on level 6. That's when her neural implant buzzed with a priority alert unlike any she'd ever received. A Class Omega notification reserved for extinction-level threats. Simultaneously, the station's emergency klaxons fell silent, replaced by an eerie quiet broken only by the structural groans of the damaged station. "Command override Epsilon 93, she said, accessing the classified channel. "Report." Instead of a verbal response, her implant projected a tactical overlay across her field of vision. What she saw made her heart rate spike for the first time since the emergency began. Hundreds, no, thousands, of objects dropping out of FTL at the edge of the solar system. Their energy signatures were unmistakable, their configuration burned into her memory from countless intelligence briefings and threat assessments. Solarian vessels, an armada larger than anything humanity had ever encountered. "All personnel, immediate evacuation protocol sundown," she commanded, her voice steadied despite the implications. "This is not a drill." The xenobiologists hardly looked up when she burst into their lab, too transfixed by the massive viewscreen displaying the same tactical data Elena was seeing through her implant. "They're back," whispered Dr. Chandrasekhar, her face illuminated by the red warning indicators. "And they've brought their entire fleet this time. 5 years ago, the Zolarians had arrived with 3 ships, just 3, and nearly brought Earth's governments to their knees with their technological superiority and thinly veiled threats. Their ambassador, High Chancellor Zix, had stood before the United Nations and casually described humans as primitive biological curiosities, barely worth cataloging, before outlining which regions of Earth they intended to study. Only a desperate technological breakthrough and unprecedented global military cooperation had convinced them that conquering Earth would cost them too dearly. They'd left with a dismissive promise to reevaluate humanity's potential in a few decades. Now they were back, 5 years early, with what appeared to be their entire civilization in tow. "Move. Now," Elena ordered, physically pulling researchers from their stations. "Next evac pod leaves in 30 seconds, with or without you." Commander Elena Reyes steadied herself against the emergency bulkhead as orbital platform Delta shuddered beneath her boots. The explosion had taken out 2 of the station's 4 stabilizers, and now the entire structure was slowly rotating off its designated axis. "Status report." She barked into her neural implant, maintaining perfect balance despite the tilting floor. "Life support at 63% and dropping, Commander," came the calm voice of Lieutenant Santos. "Evacuation pods 7 through 12 are deployed. 8 minutes until structural integrity fails in the eastern quadrant." Elena moved with practiced efficiency through the smoke-filled corridor, helping a limping technician into an evacuation pod. 5 years of leading Earth's orbital defense initiative had prepared her for crises like this, though usually they ran these scenarios as drills rather than actual emergencies. "How many still aboard?" she asked, sealing the pod and sending it hurtling toward the emergency collection point in low orbit. 17 personnel unaccounted for, mostly from engineering and xenobiology. Of course it would be the scientists, always the last to abandon their precious data. Elena adjusted her course, heading for the xenobiology lab on level 6. That's when her neural implant buzzed with a priority alert unlike any she'd ever received. A Class Omega notification reserved for extinction-level threats. Simultaneously, the station's emergency klaxons fell silent, replaced by an eerie quiet broken only by the structural groans of the damaged station. "Command override Epsilon 93, she said, accessing the classified channel. "Report." Instead of a verbal response, her implant projected a tactical overlay across her field of vision. What she saw made her heart rate spike for the first time since the emergency began. Hundreds, no, thousands, of objects dropping out of FTL at the edge of the solar system. Their energy signatures were unmistakable, their configuration burned into her memory from countless intelligence briefings and threat assessments. Solarian vessels. An armada larger than anything humanity had ever encountered. "All personnel, immediate evacuation protocol sundown," she commanded, her voice steady despite the implications. "This is not a drill." The xenobiologists hardly looked up when she burst into their lab, too transfixed by the massive viewscreen displaying the same tactical data Elena was seeing through her implant. "They're back," whispered Dr. Chandrasekhar, her face illuminated by the red warning indicators. "And they've brought their entire fleet this time." 5 years ago, the Zolarians had arrived with 3 ships, just 3, and nearly brought Earth's governments to their knees with their technological superiority and thinly veiled threats. Their ambassador, High Chancellor Zix, had stood before the United Nations and casually described humans as primitive biological curiosities, barely worth cataloging, before outlining which regions of Earth they intended to study. Only a desperate technological breakthrough and unprecedented global military cooperation had convinced them that conquering Earth would cost them too dearly. They'd left with a dismissive promise to reevaluate humanity's potential in a few decades. Now they were back, 5 years early, with what appeared to be their entire civilization in tow. "Move. Now," Elena ordered, physically pulling researchers from their stations. "Next evac pod leaves in 30 seconds, with or without you." The United Nations General Assembly Hall had never been so crowded. Representatives from all 213 member nations sat in rigid attention, surrounded by advisors who whispered urgently in their ears. The gallery above was packed with global media, their neural recorders capturing every moment for billions watching worldwide. Armed security personnel lined the walls, an unprecedented breach of UN protocol that spoke volumes about the current crisis. Elena stood at the center of it all, the crystalline object recovered from the Solarian child displayed in a containment field beside her. "The object is not merely a tracking beacon," she explained, her voice echoing through the cavernous hall. Dr. Nkosi's analysis confirms it contains quantum entanglement properties allowing instantaneous communication across vast distances, regardless of conventional space-time limitations. On the massive screens surrounding the hall, images from Mars orbit showed the enormous Solarian fleet holding position, over 300 vessels of varying sizes, their once gleaming hulls now scared and pitted. Power readings flickered erratically as their systems struggled to maintain basic functions. "Their situation is critical," Elena continued. "At current power consumption rates, life support for the cryogenic chambers will begin failing within 14 days. This is not a deception or negotiating tactic. It is simple mathematics." The Secretary General leaned forward. "And what of these harvesters that Science Advisor Traz warned about? Do we have confirmation beyond his testimony?" Helena nodded to Dr. Nkosi, who stepped forward, his tall frame imposing despite his gentle demeanor. He activated a holographic display showing microscopic images of what appeared to be crystalline structures embedded in recovered Solarian tissue samples. These nanoscopic constructs were found in Traz brain tissue, he explained. They are artificial and do not match any known Solarian technology. More concerning is their behavior. They appear to be dormant now, but show signs of previous activity consistent with neural mapping and information extraction. A murmur swept through the assembly as the implications sank in. Elena observed the reactions carefully. The Southern Hemisphere Coalition representatives exchanging alarmed glances, the European Federation ambassador making rapid notes, the Pan-Asian Alliance delegates in hushed conference. From her position at the podium, Elena could also see the secure observation booth where the rescued Solarian child had been placed. Unlike adult Solarians with their 4 eyes and blue-green skin, the child appeared almost human, an evolutionary adaptation stage that Solarians passed through before their secondary metamorphosis at puberty. The child hadn't spoken since being rescued, but her large, unblinking eyes followed every movement in the hall with unnerving intensity. The debate intensified as the Southern Hemisphere Coalition representative took the floor, her voice trembling with barely controlled emotion. Before we discuss any form of asylum, we demand acknowledgement of the Mars massacre, she declared, activating a holographic display showing the devastated Martian research station. 37 scientists and support staff, 17 children in the family habitation section. All gone in what the Solarians called a regrettable demonstration of dimensional physics. We have not forgotten. The assembly erupted in supportive shouts and counter-arguments. Elena remained silent, watching as collective human grief and anger found voice. She knew what was coming next. She had prepared for it, but still felt a chill when Marcus Wong suddenly staggered to his feet, his neural implants glowing with unexpected activity. System breach, he gasped, his eyes rolling back as his embedded Solarian tech activated without warning. His voice changed, becoming a mechanical approximation of Solarian speech patterns translated to human language. Emergency. Transmission intercepted. Solarian Military Channel Alpha 9. The massive energy signature that appeared at the edge of the solar system changed everything. Earth's orbital defense platforms activated automatically, weapon systems coming online in perfect synchronization across 27 satellites. Ground-based mass drivers in the Antarctic Defense Array pivoted skyward, their enormous barrels glowing with charged particles. In orbit around Mars, the remnants of humanity's small defense fleet, 12 vessels that would have been laughably inadequate against the Solarian Armada at full strength, moved into protective formation. And then something unprecedented occurred. 3 Solarian warships, running on emergency power reserves, broke formation from their refugee fleet and positioned themselves between Earth and the energy signature. Their weapons powered up, depleting critical life support energy in the process. "They're protecting us," General Takahashi murmured in the Joint Chiefs bunker 2 kilometers beneath Mount Fuji, watching the tactical display with disbelief. Elena stood beside him, her face illuminated by the holographic projection. "Or protecting themselves using our position," she corrected. "Let's not attribute altruism prematurely." For 72 hours, the world held its collective breath. Defense forces remained at maximum readiness, while scientists worked frantically to identify the mysterious energy signature. Religious leaders across the planet led their congregations in prayer, though whether they prayed for deliverance or for strength in the coming conflict varied widely. When the energy signature finally dispersed, revealed as a quantum echo of the dimensional rift the Solarians had fled through, the collective relief was short-lived. The false alarm had made one thing brutally clear: decisions could no longer be delayed. Every hour the refugee fleet remained in interplanetary space increased the probability of attracting actual harvester attention. Elena hadn't slept in 3 days when she walked into the United Nations chamber for the final deliberation session. Her uniform was immaculate despite her exhaustion, a small detail that she knew would be noticed and appreciated by the Solarian observers. In their culture, personal presentation during crisis indicated resolve and reliability. The Secretary General nodded to her as she took her position. "Commander Reyes, the Security Council has reviewed your team's comprehensive recommendation. We are prepared to render our decision regarding the Zolarian asylum request." Elena glanced at the observation booth where the Zolarian child sat watching. Something about the child's unwavering gaze continued to unsettle her, though she couldn't articulate why. The vote was announced without ceremony, unanimous approval with conditions. Within hours, Elena found herself aboard the human flagship, Resilience, in geosynchronous orbit above Geneva, preparing to deliver humanity's terms personally to High Chancellor Zix. The Zolarian delegation arrived in a shuttle that had once been magnificent, its biomechanical hull designed to evoke fear and awe. Now makeshift repairs marred its surface, and its propulsion systems emitted irregular energy pulses indicative of critical maintenance issues. High Chancellor Zix entered the conference room aboard the Resilience with 4 guards, the minimum his protocol would allow, though Elena noted they all wore ceremonial rather than functional armor, a concession to human security concerns, perhaps, or simply an acknowledgement that functional battle armor required energy they could no longer spare. "High Chancellor," Elena said formally, not rising from her seat at the head of the table, a deliberate power position that reversed their first meeting 5 years earlier, when Zix had remained seated while Earth's representatives stood before him. The Australian outback shimmered under the relentless summer sun, heat waves distorting the horizon, where enormous habitat domes now rose from the red earth. Transport ships crossed the sky at regular intervals, their shadows racing across the landscape as they ferried supplies and personnel between the settlement zone and orbital platforms. From Monitoring Station Alpha, Elena watched the construction through high-powered optics. The harsh environment, temperatures regularly exceeding 45 degrees Celsius, minimal water resources, and isolation from major population centers, had made the region ideal for the first Zolarian settlement. Their physiology adapted well to heat, and the limited human presence reduced the likelihood of immediate conflict. Phase 1 construction is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Captain Yumi Tanaka, the station's commanding officer. The Zolarian engineers work 20-hour shifts without breaks. They're motivated. Helena nodded. Desperation is a powerful motivator. On the displays surrounding them, footage showed the remarkable cooperation developing between human construction teams and Zolarian builders. The aliens' ability to withstand the extreme heat allowed them to handle tasks that would have required specialized equipment for humans. In return, Earth's engineers had introduced modular construction techniques that simplified the massive project. The first 1,000,000 refugees are scheduled for revival from cryostasis tomorrow, Tanaka continued, bringing up the medical readiness report. Dr. Nkosi has established 17 field hospitals surrounding the settlement perimeter. We're expecting significant medical challenges. Elena studied the medical projections with concern. Dimensional sickness. Yes, preliminary scans of cryopods indicate approximately 30% of refugees show signs of phase shifting. Dr. Nkosi believes the passage through the rift exposed them to dimensional radiation that our screening procedures couldn't initially detect. A technician approached with a data tablet. "Commander, we've just received an update from the research team. You'll want to see this immediately." Elena reviewed the information, her expression shifting from concern to cautious optimism. "Get Dr. Nkosi on comms. Priority channel." The xenobiologist's face appeared on screen moments later, his lab coat stained with what appeared to be bioluminescent Solarian bodily fluid. "Commander, we've made a breakthrough," he said without preamble. "The E. coli strain JT7 doesn't harm Zolarian physiology as we feared. Instead, it appears to bond with their cellular structure and stabilize the dimensional fluctuations. We've successfully treated 37 test subjects with advanced phase-shifting symptoms. Side effects: minimal. Some discoloration of secondary epidermis, temporary sensory disorientation. Nothing life-threatening." Elena felt the first genuine relief she'd experienced in weeks. "Begin mass production immediately. I want enough to treat all affected refugees as they emerge from cryostasis." As she ended the transmission, an alert sounded throughout the monitoring station. Red warning indicators flashed across multiple screens. "Perimeter breach in Sector 12. Tanaka called out, rushing to the tactical display. "Supply convoy under attack by unknown forces." The security feed showed 3 transport vehicles burning on the access road to the main settlement. Figures in unmarked combat gear moved with military precision, planting explosive devices on the roadway. "Earth first," Alina said grimly, recognizing the tactical formation. The human nationalist group had been growing in numbers since the refugee crisis began. "Scramble response teams. Non-lethal protocols if possible, but protect those supplies at all costs." Survival in the containment zone defied conventional physics. Reality itself rippled around Alina and her trapped companions, 3 humans and 4 Zolarians, as dimensional fluctuations warped the very fabric of space-time following the sabotage explosion. "Shift coming," shouted Carex, a Zolarian engineer whose dimensional sickness had unexpectedly become their greatest asset. "Synchronize patterns. Now." Alina focused her consciousness on the biorhythmic pattern Carex had taught them, adjusting her molecular vibration to match the approaching dimensional wave. The sensation was indescribable, like being simultaneously disassembled and expanded across multiple planes of existence. Around her, the others did the same, their bodies briefly glowing with an ethereal blue light as the shift passed through them rather than tearing them apart. When the wave passed, the containment zone looked different. The damaged power core still sparked and sputtered in the center of the chamber, but the walls now appeared semi-transparent, revealing glimpses of elsewhere. 9 minutes until the next shift, said Dr. Raiko Yamamoto, checking her modified sensor band. The geologist had been inspecting settlement foundations when the sabotage occurred, trapping her with Alina's team. Through the translucent barriers of reality, they could see them, the harvesters. Not clearly, not completely, but enough to understand why the Zolarians had flowed in such terror. Crystalline entities floated in what appeared to be a void between dimensions. They had no recognizable biology, no features that registered as eyes or mouths or limbs, yet their movements suggested terrible purpose. Where they touched the boundaries of the containment zone, reality itself seemed to bend and dissolve. "They're feeding," whispered Toran, a Zolarian security officer, "on the dimensional energies." Alina recorded everything through her neural implant, knowing this might be humanity's only chance to observe the harvesters directly. Are they sentient? Can they see us? "They exist across multiple realities simultaneously," explained Carex, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of extreme stress in Zolarians. "What we perceive is just a fraction of their true form. And yes, they are aware of us. Now." As if responding to Carex's words, several crystalline structures oriented toward their position. Alina felt a pressure in her mind, like icy fingers prodding her consciousness. "Don't engage," barked Lieutenant Mason, the human security specialist. "Mental shields up, just like we practiced." For 9 days, they survived in the fluctuating reality of the containment zone, witnessing the harvesters' activities during each dimensional shift. They discovered that the crystalline beings were systematically mapping Earth's dimensional coordinates through the rift created by the sabotage explosion. Using damaged equipment and Zolarian phase-shifting technology, the unlikely team constructed a makeshift dimensional anchor, a device that stabilized a small portion of space-time long enough to establish a communication portal. Dr. Nkosu received their transmission on the 9th day. His face appeared in the shimmering portal, initially disbelieving, then determined. "Hold position," he instructed, his voice distorted by dimensional interference. "We've modified the bacterial treatment to create a phase-shift stabilizer. Extraction team is preparing now." The rescue operation succeeded against all odds. When Alina and the survivors were finally pulled back into stable reality, they'd brought with them knowledge that would change everything. The harvesters weren't merely following the Zolarians. They had been manipulating them for decades. The International Court of Justice in The Hague had been modified for an unprecedented purpose. The historic chamber, with its vaulted ceilings and classical architecture, now housed advanced dimensional stabilizers humming softly in each corner. Security personnel, both human and a select group of trusted Zolarian guards, monitored every entrance and exit. Delegates from all nations filled the public gallery, their faces solemn beneath the weight of history being made. This was humanity's first interspecies tribunal. High Chancellor Zix and 8 members of the former Zolarian High Command sat in the defendant's area, confinement bracelets on their wrists glowing with subtle blue light, specialized technology that prevented phase shifting. Once regal in their bearing, the Zolarian leadership now appeared diminished, their skin tones dulled, and their ceremonial markings faded. Belina sat at the witness table, reviewing her notes one final time. The evidence she would present today had been gathered at tremendous cost. Lives lost, realities breached, truths uncovered that some argued might have been better left buried. The Secretary General of the United Nations rose to formally open proceedings, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. We gather today not merely to judge past actions, but to chart the course of our shared future, she began. This tribunal will determine not only the fate of those before us, but will establish precedent for interspecies justice throughout whatever future awaits our worlds. The proceedings were being simultaneously translated into all human languages and Solarian dialects, broadcast to the refugee settlements and to the remaining ships still in orbit. On the massive screens surrounding the chamber, billions of faces, human and Solarian, watched in real time, united by uncertainty about their collective future. The Chief Justice, a stern-faced woman from Ghana with 4 decades of human rights law experience, addressed Zix directly. High Chancellor, you and your command staff stand accused of crimes against both your own people and humanity. How do you plead? Zix rose with difficulty, his once commanding presence now weighted with visible burden. We acknowledge our actions, he responded, his translator conveying the complex Solarian emotional harmonics that accompanied his words. But context must be considered. We believed we acted for the survival of our species. Elena's moment came when the prosecution called her to present evidence regarding the Mars massacre. As she took the stand, the chamber's advanced holographic systems activated, creating a 3-dimensional representation of the Martian research station as it had existed before destruction. The attack on Mars was not merely a demonstration of power, Elena stated, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. Based on recovered data and testimony from Zolarian scientists who opposed the operation, we now know it was a calibrated experiment. The hologram shifted, showing Zolarian weapon signatures targeting specific sections of the human facility. The High Command wasn't testing their weapons' destructive capacity. They were measuring human resilience to various forms of dimensional disruption. The civilian scientists, support staff, and their families were test subjects in research directly connected to harvester-based technology. The observation deck of Harmony Station offered the most breathtaking view in the Earth-Moon system. Originally designed as a military installation, humanity's first permanent lunar defense platform, the station had been transformed over the past 6 months into something far more significant. Elena stood at the reinforced viewport, hands clasped behind her back, watching Earth rotate slowly below. From this distance, the planet appeared peaceful, its blues and greens and swirling white cloud patterns betraying nothing of the monumental changes that had reshaped human civilization. The final components of the cooperative shield are being positioned now, Commander, reported Lieutenant Commander Ishida, offering her a data tablet. The modified Zolarian vessels have successfully integrated with our orbital platforms. Coverage will reach 98% within the hour. Elena nodded, studying the tactical display. Thousands of vessels, human and Solarian, now formed a defensive perimeter around Earth, their energy signatures pulsing in synchronized harmony. What would have taken humanity decades to build alone had been accomplished in months, through this uneasy alliance born of necessity. "And the dimensional harmony procedure?" she asked. "Final phase initiated 20 minutes ago. Dr. Mkosu reports all parameters within expected ranges." Elena's gaze shifted to the medical section visible through an interior window. There, surrounded by the most advanced technology from both species, the Zolarian child Iria lay within a specialized chamber. Streams of bioengineered bacteria, glowing with soft blue luminescence, flowed around her small form as human genetic scientists and Zolarian biologists monitored the procedure from adjacent workstations. The child who had not spoken since her rescue now represented both species' greatest hope. Her genetic structure, artificially enhanced by generations of Zolarian-resistant scientists working in secret, contained the template for a countermeasure against Harvester influence. "Commander," Ishida said quietly, "the Memorial Garden ceremony begins in 30 minutes. The delegates are gathering." Elena nodded, taking one last look at Earth before heading toward the station's central hub. The corridors of Harmony Station reflected its name and purpose: human architectural elements seamlessly blended with Zolarian biotechnology. Vegetation from both worlds grew in carefully cultivated patterns along the walls, simultaneously decorative and functional, processing carbon dioxide and generating oxygen for the station's mixed species population. In the Memorial Garden, a circular chamber at the station's heart, representatives from both species had assembled in concentric rings around a monument still covered by a ceremonial cloth. Elena took her place beside High Chancellor Zix, now serving his sentence of redemptive reconstruction. The tribunal's verdict had shocked many. Rather than execution or permanent imprisonment, Zix and his command staff had been sentenced to lifelong service, using their expertise to build defenses against the coming Harvester invasion. Their punishment was to protect the very people they had once threatened. "Is it ready?" Elena asked quietly. Zix nodded, his once imperious demeanor replaced by a somber humility. "The artisans completed the inscriptions last night.